Clemson has went on the road and earned another ACC road win, a 79-69 quad one win in Dallas over the SMU Mustangs. Devastating for the Mustangs, who were on the bubble. They're still somewhat on the bubble, but now they're going to need to get a little lucky. For Clemson, it's a win that pushes them into the top 20 of the KenPom rankings. It's a quad one win, probably pushes them off of a debate from a 6 or 7 seed to more of a debate between a 5 or a 6 seed. Really impressive win. They started off red hot from 3, making 9 of their first 11. Jaden Zachary made 5 in a row, 5 of his first 5. And the offense couldn't be stopped. They couldn't do anything on the inside, but they just kept nailing threes. But the defense was letting SMU stick around, and Clemson only had a 4-point lead at halftime. In the second half, at least for the first 3 quarters of that first half, they were pretty stingy defensively, and Clemson had their way on the inside this time. They weren't making as many threes, but they were scoring on the inside. For the day, they ended up shooting 29 3-pointers and 28 2-pointers, and basically shooting them at the same percentage clip, which obviously makes those 3-pointers way more efficient. So just a great all-around performance. Jaden Zachary was the star of the day. He's been playing pretty well lately. He finished 6 for 13, but 5 3-pointers, 1 field goal, and 2 free throws made. Notably, didn't score as much in the second half, but still really valuable. 7 assists on the game, 5 steals in the game. He is a great defensive player. Just unbelievable with those steals. Great distributor. He's been a huge add. I mean, he's not Joe Girard as a 3-point shooter, but a very similar type 1-year guard, portal addition that means so much to the team. He's been awesome. Dylan Hunter got the start again. Chauncey Wiggins was sick a couple games ago, came off the bench, played limited minutes, and the starting lineup with Dylan Hunter's the most efficient lineup per Evan Maya in the ACC. So Dylan Hunter stays in. He wasn't as good in this one, went 0 for 5, but he had 7 assists and no turnovers. He leads the team in assist to turnover ratio. He's really careful with the ball and plays great defense. So even when he doesn't have a good shooting day, he can still help you. He's averaging just 1.8 assists, but only half a turnover. Basically the least on the team if folks who actually play a decent amount. Christian Reeves was out. This game got a little dicey for a short time because Locken picked up 2 fouls, and then Wiggins shortly thereafter picked up 2 fouls. Miles Foster played 12 minutes. I thought he was pretty good, finished with 4 points and 2 rebounds, but he picked up 2 fouls. And so Clemson, all their bigs were in foul trouble. Christian Reeves did not come off the bench to help because he has an ankle injury. So they were pretty small for a while, and that's when SMU went on a 10-0 run and actually took a lead at one point. But then Clemson reasserted themselves, went into halftime with a 4-point lead, came out of halftime and just dominated, stretched the lead out to 17 at one point, and the game was really over. It was actually Chauncey Wiggins, who had a bad first half but finished with 8. I think they were all in the second half. He drilled a 3-pointer to extend the lead. I think it was to 17 at that point, but around there, and basically end the game. They cut it down to 10. Clemson wins 79-69, but the game was over for quite a while in the second half. Another dominant performance. And now looking ahead, Clemson is 14-2 in conference play. And the games they have upcoming, again, they're just maturity games. They get Notre Dame at home. That's a 90% win probability per KenPom. After that, they don't play another top 100 team. Notre Dame's 96th in KenPom. Everyone else outside the top 100. They go to Virginia. That's their toughest game, 75% win expectancy. They go to Boston College on a Wednesday, 88% win expectancy, and they come home and they face a pretty bad Virginia Tech team, 95% win expectancy. So really good shot. They could win all of those. You think dropping one's probably the worst. They could win the conference. It would be a tiebreaker, but they own the tiebreaker over Duke. They just need Duke to drop a game. So hopefully that happens and Clemson can claim, I think it'll be their second ever ACC regular season conference championship. Duke has Miami on the road, which is pretty close to a free win. They get Florida State at home, which is not a free win by any means, but they'll probably win that one. They host Wake Forest. Wake Forest will be desperate. That could be a tournament kind of playing game for them. And they go to Chapel Hill to play North Carolina. So it may be Clemson watching the Duke Wake Forest game and the Duke UNC game to see if they could win the conference outright. So that'll be a fun finish there. But Clemson lined up to get a double bye. and they're in a really good spot. Meanwhile, Louisville sits at 14-2, and Louisville, their schedule is also very manageable. They have Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh, Cal, and Stanford. They hold the tiebreaker over Clemson. So at the moment, it looks like Clemson could be the 3 seed in the tournament, but it could be a 3-way tie for first place if Duke loses and then Clemson and Louisville win out. So all 3 teams with a chance to win the conference still. It's been a good race to the top. Wake Forest and SMU, the 4 and the 5, both taking losses on Saturday. Wake Forest, a bad loss at NC State. Maybe that puts them outside the NCAA tournament looking in. They could maybe afford a loss to Duke if they win the rest. And even that's kind of iffy. SMU's got to win out and just hope things kind of break their way. So if you're Clemson, you're feeling good. Your seeding just got a lot better with this SMU win. And on that note, let's take a look at some of these teams here. These are 3 teams, kind of a blind resume here. And as you can see, if you start at the bottom, you see the strength of schedule very different between these teams. And this is kind of my complaint, is that teams play different schedules. And as conference play is expanded in the ACC's 20 games, you don't get enough crossover play. And most of the crossover play is very early. So you really are guessing. So you look at these teams, you see the 5, 2 6 seeds, and then a 7 at the end. But the best records is actually the 6th seed, Team C, and then the 7th seed after them. They're looking pretty good too. But in the net, Team D is 48, but that seems weird because they're 6-2 against quad 1 opponents. So it seems like they're really being hurt by that strength of schedule. Team C, their net's still good. Their offensive efficiency is great, and they have a winning record against quad 1. And yet the teams projected one Team B, just matching them, and Team A, a 5 seed, their numbers don't look really as good. Their record's worse. Team A's got a worse net. They're not as efficient offensively. They're about the same defensively. They're worse in against quad 1. They happen to play more quad 1 games, but they're losing them. So it's just interesting. And here's who those teams are: Marquette, Ole Miss, Clemson, and Memphis. And when you look at it, you got to wonder, does Memphis, so should they be the 5 in this scenario? You could say their strength of schedule is weaker because they play in the ACC, the AAC. So they get some softer games at the bottom of their schedule, but they went to Clemson and won. They beat Missouri. They actually beat Ole Miss. They beat Michigan State. That's a great win. And then you look at Clemson, they have wins over Duke, Kentucky, and they're 22-5. Ole Miss, they're 8-6 in SEC play. It's great that you play a tough schedule, but you lose a lot more games. They have 8 losses. Bama, Kentucky are great wins. That's not as good as Duke and Kentucky, though. But, the bottom of the SEC is so much better than the bottom of the ACC. And it seems that a lot of these metrics and these projections, these are Jerry Palm seed projections, are leaning very, very heavily on just who you played, not what you did against them. Marquette is an interesting one. You compare them to some of the seeds below them. They have a worse record than Clemson. They have a worse net than Clemson. They have a worse KenPom offensive efficiency, which is opponent adjusted. They have basically the same defense. Their record as a win percentage is worse against quad 1. They've just played more. Their schedule's tougher, but you look at their best wins, it's Maryland and Purdue, good wins, but that's not Duke and Kentucky. So I would love to see Clemson even push for 5. I think Clemson's getting pretty close to locking in a 6 seed or better. Obviously, if they could blow that, but before the talk was a 7, even an 8 not too long ago, and they've done a lot to improve their seeding. And it's interesting, Coach Brownell, late in the game, up 17, he's not putting in the reserves. He's pedal to the metal, trying to get a dominant win to help the metrics. Here's, I think, one of the big challenges for the committee. I think it takes away from the sport. It takes away our ability to compare teams. And it's this is how the schedule is broken up. It's way too much conference play. The entire more than second half of the season is all conference play. So you start off the year, you get these what I'm calling bye games, what we in football call cupcake games. You're playing Florida A&M, you're playing Winthrop, Charleston Southern, whoever it may be, those type teams early in the schedule. In purple, those are your major non-con opponents for Clemson. That's the first one you see is Boise State. Later, you see Memphis, South Carolina are in there. Kentucky's in there. That's the purple. The tournament is when they played Penn State, and they played San Francisco. That they weren't in the Maui, but the Maui is the one that you've heard of. And then, of course, orange represents ACC play. So you get all this stuff early. Well, teams change. This is how I think they should do it. Now imagine this. You start off the year. It's football season. It's November. You play your bye games. You play Florida and A&M. People are focused on football anyway. The basketball team is kind of rounding into form, getting ready for the bigger games. Then, you're through football season. You finish Thanksgiving shortly after Thanksgiving. Now your football regular season schedule is done. And now we have ACC games early on, 8 in a row, maybe 7, maybe 8, maybe 9, depends on the team, the year and all that. But about 8 games, nearly half of your conference games are happening in December and spilling into January, right? So college football has their bowl games, the playoff, which is ever expanding. Check out the video on that. But you got a lot of focus on the ACC. Now, all of a sudden, you get into mid to late January. College football has just wrapped up. And now college basketball hits you with a slap as all of a sudden there's great games. You got the Maui. You got all these tournaments in all parts of the country, whether it's Hawaii or down in Miami, all these different games they've got. You're excited for the tournament. Your attention is on all of these tournaments. They mean so much more. Imagine Clemson, Kentucky, all those type games, whether it's Duke playing Michigan State, those type games are now happening mid-season in, let's say, late January. They're getting a lot of hype, and they're going to tell us a lot more about these teams than a really early game between Georgia Tech and Oklahoma. These teams have not rounded into form yet, and we're judging the ACC as being a garbage conference because these teams lost their very first month or their second month really early on in these non-conference games before the teams are ready. So you get through that, you've sparked a lot of interest, brought a lot of attention, and then you close out the stretch run of a little bit more than half of your ACC games. You know who's good, and you know what's at stake, and now you kind of got a feel for it, and you got the stretch run. You get back to playing ACC games. You spread out the teams, a couple teams in the ACC, not as many, but the teams you play twice, you make sure you get all of them. Clemson will play Georgia Tech, Florida State, and this year it would have been Virginia Tech in some of those first 8 games. Then there's a break. You don't play them too soon, like they played Georgia Tech twice, relatively close together. You get rid of that. You space it out more, and you have a really exciting stretch run finish. This is how I think they got to do it. This is the breakdown. But in total, Clemson played 5 what I call bye games against the Florida A&M, Charleston Southern type teams. They had the 2 tournament games, 4 major non-con opponents, most notably Kentucky, but that includes Boise State, Memphis, and South Carolina as well. Put those a little bit later. So that's what college basketball can do to make it A, more fun, B, get more attention, but also make the committee's job easier. Don't base so much on how good is a conference according to how they did in November and early December. I think this makes a lot more sense for everyone. So regardless, huge win for Clemson going to SMU, picking up another quad 1 win. They're in great shape to close out the year. Maybe they could win their second ever ACC regular season championship or their first ever ACC tournament championship. Regardless, it's been a great season, a historic one, maybe one of the Clemson's best teams of all time. Hey, thanks for watching this. I appreciate everyone who watches basketball content. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. As always, go Tigers.